Thank you, everyone, so much. My name is Victor. We're Sandbox Percussion. Thanks so much for coming out to the concert tonight. So good to see all of you. Thanks to 92nd Street Y for having us. We're a percussion quartet based in Brooklyn, New York, so it didn't take too long to get here. Yeah. We're super excited for tonight's program. It features all pieces that are either a New York premiere or a world premiere. And premiering new pieces is kind of a really big part of what we do in a percussion quartet. As you can probably imagine, there's not a ton of centuries of repertoire to draw from, so we're working with a lot of composers to develop new pieces. So that first one was called Unwandering Souls by Vivian Fung. And it was actually a piece that was originally written in 2021 that we gave a video premiere of, but we loved it so much we asked Vivian if she would kind of expand and lengthen on some of the compositional ideas that she had, specifically for this concert. So that's the first time that we ever got to hear that piece. And there were some kind of interesting instruments that you heard. There were some tuned glass bottles, some tuned rice bowls that Ian was playing. Johnny had some tuned wooden slats. Terry had a gong laying flat. Some kind of interesting sounds. I think as we each kind of go through and talk a little bit about each piece, you'll find some new kind of interesting sounds. So speaking of new pieces and premieres, our next piece is by our good friend Ellis Ludwig-Leone, and I would love to bring him up on the stage and talk a little bit about his piece. Please welcome Ellis.
Hi, I'm Ellis. This next piece that you're going to hear is a world premiere, so buckle up. The piece is organized, it's called Lifeline, and it's organized into two sort of short little movements. The first one's fast and the second one's slow. And when I started talking with Ian, we were having a beer and talking about what a piece might be like. One of the things that he mentioned is that they didn't have a ton of stuff in their repertoire that had more melodic information or sort of harmonic information. Often people, when writing for a percussion quartet, you think rhythm, rhythm, rhythm. And so my first sort of missive was to think, okay, how would I write for a percussion quartet, but treat it a little bit more almost like a string quartet, where you have these sort of melodic lines that flow in and out of each other. And so I knew I wanted the second movement to have these sustained, longer harmonies. I was also watching a lot of nature documentaries around the same time. And I don't know if you've heard about this phenomenon called bait ball, but basically it's like when a large group of fish gets sort of surrounded by predators, and they all sort of squish up into this big sort of churning mass, and then sort of eventually get eviscerated by tuna or shark or whatever happens. And it's very existential, to be honest, because it's like it's a lot of life that just gone very quickly. And so the way that this piece is organized, the first movement is very kinetic, very fast. It's like a school of fish that's moving around, and there's a lot of expansions and contractions in the metric grid. And then basically they all get eaten, and the second half is actually just sort of like the sort of memory of this sort of life that did exist. So yeah, anyway, Lifeline, world premiere. Thank you so much, and thank you to Sandbox Percussion. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the next piece we're going to play, which is actually us finally using this piano that's in the middle of the stage. This is a, let me get this right, this is a prepared piano concerto for piano and percussion quartet. Is that right, Chris? Okay, great. So the next piece is by the composer Chris Cerrone. It's by, the name of the piece is Don't Look Down. This piece, like many others on the program, like Vic was saying, come out of these really close relationships and friendships that we have with the composers we're working with. This piece is obviously no exception. I think Don't Look Down is maybe the culmination of almost a decade of making crazy percussion pieces with Chris Cerrone. Also many years of friendship with the pianist Conor Hanick. As you can see, all the things happening around me, this piece takes quite a few forces to make happen, a lot of instruments, a lot of people in the room, so we're so excited to get to play it for you all tonight. Before we do that, I'm going to invite Chris Cerrone up here to tell you all some more about the piece. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Terry, for the introduction. So as you may have been able to infer, this whole thing feels a bit like a family affair. These folks are very close friends of mine, and I think this is the third composition I've written for Sandbox and some combination. But the project actually begins with Conor, the pianist, asking me to write him a piano concerto. And as it happens, just at the same time, I had been commissioned by none other than the 92nd Street Y to write a different piano concerto. And so I said, listen, maybe something a little bit different would be in store. And so, but I also knew that Conor, amongst of his many other skills, had been able to play the John Cage prepared piano sonatas and interludes. And so I said to him, why not? What about a prepared piano concerto? And he said, okay, I can go with that. And then he said, well, what about prepared piano and Sandbox percussion? And I said, of course, any opportunity to work with Sandbox is one that I'm eager to have. So I began writing the piece in February 2020, sort of thinking it'd be another regular piece, and a series of extremely unusual events transpired shortly after. And for us musicians, while I think it was pretty terrifying for everyone because they thought they were going to die and they thought they were going to, we musicians suddenly also were completely, utterly unemployed. And so, while I was writing this piece, the presenter of the premiere, Caramore, offered to do a live stream of the piece. And so they said, we're still on for this summer. We're going to make this work. And so I had this feeling while writing this piece that I didn't know what was happening in the world, but as long as I kept writing and I did not, like Wile E. Coyote, look down, everything was going to be okay. Because when he looks down, he falls off the cliff. So I was thinking about, I am looking at a note. I'm not checking Instagram. A thought I had from one of my childhood heroes, the writer Kurt Vonnegut, and it was his Guide to Writing 101. And one of the favorite rules I loved was, give your readers as much information as possible. To heck with suspense. Readers should have such complete understanding of what was going on, where and why, that they could finish the story themselves should cockroaches eat the last few pages. So what I wanted to do right now is that I think we have a number of traditional percussion instruments in this concert. We have a vibraphone, marimba, another vibraphone, piano, bass drum set. I wanted to just sort of talk through some of the unusual sounds in this piece and explain them to you. And so the first thing you'll find is that I used one material primarily inside the piano. It is a poster tack. So it's called blue tack, putty, and there are 3 sounds inside the piece that occur because of this blue tack. The first is on the very top of the instrument. Conor will play a kind of drum solo on the piano. It's these kind of muted sounds, very percussive. When he starts playing real notes, you might think they did not do such a good job tuning the piano tonight, because what I've actually done is deliberately detune the piano using this poster tack. If you use just a little bit of it, as you know, piano is 3 strings per note. One of them is out of tune with the others, and so you'll hear a very out of tune piano. And I can assure you, this is on purpose. Some of the other interesting things that appear in this piece, you will see in the corner there is a bike pump. The bike pump is, I was actually working on this piece, and my wife Carrie, who is right there, I was literally pumping my bike tires as to make my bikes more pneumatic. And she comes out and she's like, oh, I thought you were composing. And I was like, this does sound like my music, so this is going in the piece. You'll also see some more conventional instruments being transformed. So over here, Johnny you'll see aluminum foil placed on top of his marimba, as well as some brushes, and that is to create a very buzzing sound on the instrument. It's inspired by the African mbira, which is a kind of thumb piano, which often has a buzzing sound, which I always found so beautiful. So I was inspired by this, and so we went to recreate the buzzing sound on the marimba. You'll see here that we have 2 different harmonicas, and they're played, I say a la Bob Dylan, but what's different than Bob Dylan is that pieces of tape have been applied to nearly every single hole of the harmonica, except 6 or 7, 2 or 3 really, and those are so they can play just a single note. It's not going to be chords like a harmonica is designed to do, but just simply to sustain a sound. You have a wine bottle, as Victor is just really well-timedly displaying, and he will blow into that. It's tuned to E flat. And you have here some cowbells, and these are what we call in music Glocken, which is a cowbell, but it is tuned to a different pitch. And then over here we have Ian. He has a woodblock. That's a pretty conventional instrument, but I said I don't like this woodblock. I want the woodblock to be more muted, and so he said I'll make a smaller one, and then it got smaller, and then I said, what if you put like 9 pieces of tape on it, and finally it was muted enough that we were able to get the sound I wanted. And also you'll see that every single member of the ensemble has sandpaper, as you know, for making things less sharp. And this became a kind of, Ian once said to me that I write the hardest sandpaper block music ever composed. So, if I ever, have a moment in the history books, it will be because of my sandpaper block virtuosic etudes. And last but not least, Johnny. It's funny, I was writing this piece, and I was like, I grew up playing in rock bands and jazz, and sort of writing this part for a hi-hat and a bass drum and a snare drum, and I was like standing it up awkwardly, and I was like, this is a drum set, isn't it? So I had despite having this background, never written for a drum set before, so I had the kind of chance to work very closely with Johnny, who's a really excellent drummer. And so I think they're starting to be ready. You guys ready? So the last thing I'll say about this is that the really fun thing about working with these folks for so long is you start to write parts for them, not for Percussion One, but I know, for example, Victor, who will also be, amongst other things, playing piano, scraping inside the piano with a credit card, and I know he loves to do things like that. He loves to find out some contraption to figure out a way. And he'll also, by the way, the last thing I'll say is that the piano, in addition to all these things, is actually bowed. Now, the bowed piano is actually taking a large piece of fishing line, covering it in violin rosin, and it will sing like a string instrument. And so I kind of gave him that part, knowing that he loves to play. He loves to figure out challenges. And I know Johnny's an incredible drum set player, and I know that Ian loves playing vibraphone on my pieces. And Terry just has really long arms, which you'll see is incredibly useful in this piece. You think I'm joking, but I can assure you it's incredibly helpful. So I think they're ready now. I think I've covered this set change thoroughly, so I really do hope you enjoy it. It's in 3 minutes, three continuous movements.
Thank you all so much. And thank you, Conor, for that enchanting performance of Etudes. And I also wanted to say thank you to the composer of that piece who couldn't be here tonight, but I believe is watching on the live stream. So thank you, Sam Carl Adams. It's a gorgeous work, yeah. And I did want to take a moment just to say a brief comment about the next piece by Tyshawn Sori. It brings to mind a quote that I really love about music, that music is not in the notes but in the space between them. And I've heard that attributed to both Mozart and Debussy, so if you prefer it in German or French, you can take your pick. But that quote is true for, I guess, all music, but there aren't many more pieces which it could be more appropriate for than this next one. Tyshawn has this way of expanding time. He'll take what could be 15 seconds of music and turn it into 15 minutes, and it's like, I compare it to like taking a tour through outer space or something like that. These objects come along, but mostly you're existing in that space between things, and the experience is less about the objects themselves and more about the sort of resonance created, your memory of those objects, and possibly the anticipation of what might be coming next. So hopefully that prepares you a bit for kind of the headspace we're all about to enter into here. But without further ado, here is For Arthur Jaffa by Tyshawn Sori.
maybe just one more round of applause for Conor Hanick, because he's leaving the stage right now. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you to the crew at the 92Y for dealing with us all day. Really, really appreciate that, yeah. We have one more piece for you, and after we finish this piece, I hope you'll join all of us just on the other side of this wall, where I hear there is a bar that is giving out free drinks to all of you, so I hope that you'll join us there. This last piece on the program is by a dear friend of all of ours, a composer named Andy Akiho. Andy wrote this piece, Portal, this past year. It was premiered last summer. And this piece is interesting because it's an open instrumentation piece. It can be played by any group of performers, any instruments that they want. The musical material that we play is set, the notes and the rhythms, but there's so much flexibility that Andy builds into the score. There are no dynamics. The orchestration, who is playing what, the pacing of the piece, all of this is sort of left to the performer. I was lucky enough to be a part of the premiere performance of this piece a few months ago, and that was with a group of like 20 of us. Strings, woodwinds, a singer, a couple percussionists. It was a completely different experience than when the four of us started to try to figure out how to arrange this piece a few weeks ago. So what you're going to hear is Sandbox's and Andy's sort of interpretation of this piece for four percussionists. I think that's about it. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's really been a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy Portal. Thank you.